After studying this module, we will be able to learn about the background and key constructs of spiritual counseling, understand the major contributions of spirituality to the field of counseling and psychotherapy, and will be able to explain the counseling process involved in the spiritual approach. And the last is examine the technique, procedure and intervention strategies adopted by spiritual counselor. Spirituality is a concept which cannot be locked down into a few words or a definition. It can be seen as the basis or core over which all the religions are standing tall, the essence towards all the doctrines, symbols and religious rituals points. The recent past has witnessed a growing trend across the range of disciplines of connecting spirituality directly to a lot of clinical complexities. In the field of psychology and psychotherapy as well, renowned contributors have published important researches about such connections. Professional associations such as Association for Spiritual, Ethical and Religious Values in the Counseling has published list of competencies for spirituality focused counseling and clinical work. Competencies for spirituality focused counseling and clinical work. Evidence exists that a lot of field in psychology in past have also connected to it. For example, addiction counseling, rehabilitation counseling. It is hence being now regarded as a fifth force in counseling. In these two modules, an overview of the spiritual counseling approach would be presented by examining first its origins and then its view of the individual, of what makes the person what she or he is. These modules will explicate the way in which practitioners of this particular position look at the individual client in particular. Next, one would consider the role of counselor and examine ways in which the client is expected to contribute to the counseling process. The counselor's job varies directly with the role of the client.
Professional associations such as Association for Spiritual, Ethical and Religious Values in Counseling has published list of competencies for spiritually focused counseling and clinical work. Evidence exists that a lot of fields in psychology in past have also connected to it. For example, addiction counseling, rehabilitation counseling. It is hence being now regarded as the fifth force in counseling. The word spirituality is derived from the Latin word spiritus, which means breath. It is the fundamental orientation to one's life. According to Kurtz, one's spirituality engenders a way of being and experiencing, involving meaning, wholeness, openness to the infinite, and connectedness to others and the natural world. For Anna Carr, on the other hand, spirituality is expressed in everything one does. On individual level, it can be a style unique to the self in behavior, bodily expressions, choices, etc. It is deeply informed by family, teachers, friends, community, class, race, etc. Just as It is influenced by personal beliefs, intellectual positions, and moral options. To different individuals, it has different meanings. For some, being spiritual involves regular worshipping, say by going to a temple, or a church, or a mosque, believing in an idol, or diligently following principles and values of a religion, etc. However, for some individuals, it stretches far beyond the boundaries of any religion, which is only one expression of it. To these individuals, being spiritual could be any art form which creatively connects them to the divine or higher powers. It can be linked to private prayers, meditation or yoga, interaction with others or nature, etc. Whatever may the channel be, the ultimate goal of spirituality is the alleviation of mental, emotional, and spiritual distress, thought to be, at least in part, caused by the lack of an appropriate relationship with the ultimate reality, most often signaled by or reflected in an inappropriate relationship with other people and things. Spirituality is less a method than an attitude, a posture of one's very being that allows seeing not different things but everything differently. Spirituality and religion, are they alike? Being spiritual or being religious are the terms which we often use interchangeably. However, both of them have their own individual essence. Therefore, it is important to highlight the difference between them. Firstly, it is important to understand the concept of religion as we have understood the concept of spirituality. The word religion is derived from the Latin word religio, which means binding together. Concept of religion can be understood as a medium of organized worship and fellowship and the expression of belief in the conduct and ritual. It involves practices which help bind different individuals together as well as to the divine. It can be considered as framework through which spirituality is expressed. This expression can be in the form of rituals, symbols, idols, social identity, lifestyles, conduct, practices, or institutions, etc. Thomas Hart has said that, in relation to the organized religion, spirituality is both prior and more personal. It is the reason religious organizations come into being. Hence, it can be well understood that religion and spirituality are not alike. Rather, religion can be considered as one of the parts of spirituality that connects a soul to the divine. Roots of spirituality in counseling. Spirituality has been described recently as the quintessential element of the human condition. Major key points and the outline of its development in the field of psychology has recently been highlighted by many scholars. The roots of psychology as a profession and as a discipline lie deep in the spiritual soil. The etymological root psyche is a classic Greek concept of soul. Psychology is literally the study of the soul, the very essence of what it is to be human. Long before, when there were no psychologists, people brought their psychic troubles to their spiritual leaders, and many still do. In the early Western philosophy and the Judeo-Christian religious traditions, the practice of soul care involved the guided discovery of the perennial truths as well as high life living, which facilitated healing and wellness by the alleviation of mental, emotional, and spiritual distress. It is from where the modern day counseling and psychotherapy has evolved. During those days, mental healing by philosophers, wise guides, gurus, rabbis, pastors, etc., were well accepted. The Greek word psyche, or soul, and pneuma, the Hebrew roch, all refer to the life force or essence of the whole person, the central unifying element of human body, mind, and spirit. The seed of this element was conceived as soul. In the present scenario, The phase of practice might have undergone significant changes. However, across the expanse of history, the elements of soul care or techniques, tools used to facilitate this process has modified but are still well rooted in the ancient times. Illness was seen as a symbol of expression of the internal conflicts and dis-ease within the whole person or as a result of disturbed relations with others. One can also see the religious and philosophical traditions of care as ancient psychologies with psychotherapeutic implications. Teachings offered in Quran, Bhagavad Gita, Upanishads, Buddhism's Four Noble Truths, or models and guidance from monks and Zen masters are still regarded as, in the earlier times, the spiritual and holistic ways of understanding the world and living rightly within it. The counseling they provided was sought to be transformative and healing. In the present day, these spiritual guides as replaced by professionals we known as psychologists or psychotherapists, keeping the vision of reality grounded in religious faith, of any sense the sacred, or of centuries old tradition of good life.
Various important movements led to the development of spiritual or religious perspective into the field of psychology, some of which can be presented as follows. First is the Emmanuel movement, an effort to integrate theology with therapy with ties to the mainstream medical establishment of its days. Next is the advent of mental hygiene movement and the work of Clifford Beers, one of the early forebearers of professional counseling. The pastoral care movement, led by Anton Boysen and symbolized by the rise of pastoral counseling and the clinical pastoral education, the birth of new scholarly field of inquiry called the psychology of religion, which explored the potential of religious experience to nourish personality development or move a person from egoism to altruism. In the early decades of 20th century, there were many important thinkers and writers who propagated the relationship between psychotherapy and religion. They laid the base for rise of people's interest in spirituality. Amongst the other renowned writers was Anton Boysen, whose autobiographical and theological works Out of the Depths and The Exploration of the Inner World were very influential during the period of clinical pastoral trainings. The mental health movement, which was understood as a medium for uniting health and religion, was initiated due to the autobiographical sketch A Mind That Found Itself by Clifford Beers. A lot of critical writers from different fields such as from psychology, writings of William James in varieties of religious experience, Rollo May in the art of counseling, from clinical pastoral education, Richard Cabot's work in training for mastery also had an important influence. And there was the ongoing protest against one-sided secular views of health and humanity made by the emerging 12-step programs and their success with previously intractable problems, rooted in a view of human health that integrated spiritual concerns.
Rise of contemporary interests in spirituality. The advent of postmodern constructionism. In the postmodern world, No dogma, either religious or psychological, holds ultimate sway or commands unanswering devotion. People construct the events and meanings of their lives subjectively and live accordingly. Clients' religious and spiritual beliefs are then part of the subjective reality they bring with them, and this reality is shaped by the communities of which they are a part. The job of a clinical caregiver is to understand these beliefs and meanings and to work with the client's realities. Increased attention to the outcomes of social science research into development of healthy families, wellness, and spiritual well-being. The quality of life research that emerged out of the social indicators movement is a case in the point, as significant weaknesses in the quality of life literature were seen to emerge due to the neglect or omission of meaningful religious variables and rigidity of methodological approaches. The contemporary emphasis on holistic thinking and movements to include supplemental and alternative medicine approaches. As biopsychosocial paradigm of illness and health has taken hold, coupled with deeper appreciation of ecological approaches to biological and social systems, more and more people have come to see the values of integrating the healing arts, psychotherapy, counseling, and spirituality. In these newer perspectives, the boundaries are more fluid, multidisciplinary teams and processes are in vogue, and scientists and scholars are working in cross disciplinary terms and exploring areas previously considered off limits. Physical health and healing are now seen as more continuous with emotional, developmental, natural, and spiritual health.
Health panels of NIHR has highlighted some of the interesting findings which can be presented as follows. Patients with chronic medical illness such as cystic fibrosis, diabetes and various forms of cancer frequently use religious and spiritual practices as adjunct to medical care and report positive benefits. There appears to be a reduction in mortality in general for those who attend worship services more frequently, especially with elderly. Meditation is reported to have a number of positive health benefits, including lowering of blood pressures, reducing chronic pain, increasing quality of life, and increasing longevity. Spirituality among cancer survivors is associated with positive health, reduced anxiety, and reduced level of pain. Many religious beliefs and practices are associated with reduced involvement in illness producing risky behavior, for example, abusive drinking, smoking, and other drug use. New Age practices emphasize psycho-spiritual approaches that integrate traditional psychotherapies with spiritual awareness and practices, with the ultimate goal of personal growth and self-realization.
The impact of this eclectic approach has extended towards psychotherapy as well. Traditional psychotherapeutic approaches and techniques are getting creatively connected with practices such as breathwork, transcendental meditation, yoga, and other meditative practices so as to improve management of stress, anxiety, coping, and wellness. As well as exciting practices are being revised keeping in line with the changing trends. For example, Alan Marlett, a well-known cognitive behavior therapist, has been working recently to include Buddhist meditation in his recovery therapy and relapse prevention related to ignition. Christina Groff, and her work exploring spiritual emergencies. Investigation of Quantum Change by William R. Miller and others. The cultural disenchantment with materialism and the promises of modern science leading to spiritual hunger in an age of plenty. Morey has finely quoted that the great malady of the 21st century, implicated in all our troubles and affecting us individually and socially, is loss of soul. In an age of plenty, we remain hungry and perhaps more confused and restless than being healthy. While many benefits have come our way, we've also become spiritually rootless, in the words of one keen observer, spiritually homeless. The present era of 21st century has, no doubts, blessed with a lot of new development, such as wealth, power, material benefits, etc. Still, somewhere, the quality of relationships, life, and soul has deteriorated, so much so that it made all of us fall more sick or lose the meaning of life itself. Hence, religious rebonding can be considered as a savior which can facilitate that missing something. The need to work effectively within a multicultural context, sensitively attending to clients' diverse ethnic, cultural, and value backgrounds. Globalization has resulted in a growing trend of migration in various parts of the world, with countries being no more inhabited by only a single ethnic group, rather are shared by increasingly diverse population from around the world. Hence, clients coming for therapy expect that their values as well as their ethnic and cultural experiences, including spiritual events and understanding, should get honored and utilized for therapeutic processes. The rise of attention to women's issues, especially with regard to post trauma experiences and survivorship, as well as recovery of a sense of women's leadership and connected concerns with ecology and care for the earth. The sensitivity to women's needs in the society in terms of issues related to trauma and recovery has reflected upon the paths taken by her in the journey of recovery, mentoring, and leadership. Many of these paths are spiritual ones and lead to exploration of spiritual lifestyles and practices, old and new. Herman speaks of those whose spiritual path takes the move towards social action as a way to reclaim authority and a positive self image in the face of trauma and victimization. Social action allow the traumatized person to become survivors and require a mystical sense of connection to others. Influence of group movements, including 12-step fellowships. The cultural phenomena of the 12-step movement have become another motive for spiritual interest and expectations among counseling consumers. These fellowships, the core of a large recovery movement that emphasizes spiritual growth and development, have not only promoted the integration of spiritual perspectives into clinical care, but they have also drawn the attention of practicing clinicians to the active ingredients or agents of change they employ. They clearly state that these agents are spiritual in nature and effect. A stance of practicality, given the contemporary search for and worldwide reorientation to consideration of the sacred. A lot of people out of those coming for counseling today bring with them some sort of worldview about religion or spirituality with which they found their association to be meaningful. It is expected from the counselor to incorporate these viewpoints into their therapeutic procedures so as to facilitate a better, refined, and congenial recovery. As a lot of people are becoming disenchanted with the modernity, they do not look upon traditional, modern counseling to a great extent. Who am I? As a spiritually oriented practitioner, the counselor must try and come to each new counseling relationship with an awareness of who he or she is and what the client or clients are. What will they expect out of this association? Because it is believed that what is actually done and the skills employed in the task are a function of what he or she thinks and he or she is doing. A counselor professional identity and conceptualization of the work are a product of his or her lifelong and ongoing pastoral and clinical conversations, which become the core of professional commitments, and hence the work is considered as a sacred privilege. The counseling room. The aura of the counseling room, or the chamber where the client and the counselors interact, is of supreme importance, as it is the place where deep rooted emotions and thoughts come out and get directed towards the ultimate goal of a meaningful life. It is in this context that a client and counselor engage in authentic relationships and encounter their ground in the mysterious course. It is ultimately double-edged encounter and the perspective and skills that facilitate healing. Spiritual platform. When a client and a counselor connects to one another during a counseling session, a spiritual environment is created around them, which is influential on their interactions. Harry Aponte to this reflects that attending to the spiritual aspects of clients' personal struggles calls for awareness by clinician of the spiritual environment they created in their therapy. All the therapy rests on a spiritual platform of values and philosophical outlook. The spiritual platform they construct will support or undermine, contribute to, or detract from the spirituality of their clients. The therapy will shape people's solution to their problems and thereby the spiritual quality of their lives. Spirituality as relationship and connectedness. Spirituality is posture of one's very being that allows seeing not different things but everything differently. Persons who live a spiritually devoted life or who are in the path towards attainment of spiritual insight are guided to observe, absorb, and process same things but yet with a fresh set of references, so that the meaning which was earlier hidden to them can get enlightened, and a new meaning of life can be understood. This new way of seeing is essentially a contemplative gaze or approach to life and work that incorporates the awareness of God's presence and activity in all of life. Spirituality is about living and growing one's relationship with the supreme powers, and this relationship can actively be formed by a contemplative approach to life, which leads to revelation of the ultimate power, the God. And each one gets invited into a deeper, insightful relationship with God. It is hence important to note that a loving relationship with God is the core and driving force of a spiritual life, as it gives rise to a different sense of self and world which becomes a catalyst for recovery and changes in life.
Let us summarize what we have discussed. The fifth force of the discipline, spiritual counseling, is an area which is gaining importance rapidly in the present era of the 21st century, as a lot of people feel a strong deprivation in their lives. In terms of its relevance, meaning, and purpose, they have begun to compulsively strive toward the guidance which can help them develop a close relationship with the supreme powers, a relationship which will help them enhance as a person and become self-actualized and encourage them to further guide other individuals.